Okay, so today we're talking about Unit 4, Module 8.1, and we're starting with Day 2, graphing simple radical or rational functions. So we want to look at how the graphs of this function and this one, notice this says A, this says 1 over B, are related to the graph of 1 over x. So to give you a little background, a rational function has two parts called branches. Today we did some exploratory, so this should look familiar. The two pieces, the pink pieces, are the graph of f of x equals 1 over x. Those two pink pieces are branches. They have two asymptotes. Asymptotes are lines that can never ever be crossed. So your graph and your equations will get really close to them, but they'll never actually cross them. When A is positive, the branches will be in quadrants 1 and quadrant 3. When A is negative, will be in quadrants 2 and quadrants 4. Now, the asymptotes will change on our H and K's. H and K are going to change our asymptotes. So again, A stretches the graph vertically, B stretches the graph horizontally, H translates the graph horizontally, and K translates the graph vertically. This is the same for every function. So hopefully you guys are starting to get that down. All right, so we are going to identify the translation of the graph f of x, 1 over x, that produces the graph of g of x. Here's our equation. So looking at this, I have already had graphed that f of x equals 1 over x. We're going to graph this one on here, but before we graph it, we're going to talk about what's going on. So let's look at our values. It's being stretched. A is 3, so that means it's being stretched vertically by 3. By a factor of 3. Now, this -1 means that the graph is translated horizontally 1 unit right. And then this 2 right here, that means that the graph is being translated vertically 2 units up. All right, so make sure you get this copied down because it's kind of in the way of our graph, so I'm going to erase it here in a minute. So we want to graph. Well, remember, our points are x, comma, y, and we talked last time about when it's a factor, it actually multiplies, and when it's a translation, it adds or subtracts. So we're going to kind of look at where our asymptotes are and where these values go to. So this tells me I have an asymptote here at +1. We denote the asymptotes with dotted lines. This one tells me I have an asymptote at +2. So remember, K is your y value, so it's going to be crossing the y axis. H is your x value, so it's going to be crossing the x axis. That's why it's kind of looking opposite. Now, we're going to look at a couple of points. Some points are 1, 1, and -1, -1. Those are kind of some key points. It's where our graph of f of x equals 1 over x bends. So when we look at that, this tells me that the y value is being multiplied by 3, and then we're going to add 2. And here, the x value is just adding 1 to each of them. So that gives me my new point of 2, comma, 1 times 3 is 3 plus 2 makes it 5. And then this one goes to, we add 1, that's 0. And then times 3 plus 2, that's -3 plus 2, which is -1. So we're still going to be in the same quadrants. If you look at these dotted blue lines, it's almost like I switched my x and y axes. So this is now kind of like my origin. So my graph should be somewhere over here and somewhere here. Now specifically this point here, 2, 5. So we're going to get this value that comes like this. And then this one's been moved to 0, -1, which is right here. So this one's going to come down, and I know it's going to cross there. So the 3 values kind of pulling it further out from that origin. Here's our sketch. We're going to practice some more of these and what these shifts and translations do. We have one more that I want to look at. This is dealing with B. So remember, 0.5, negative 0.5 is like saying negative 1 over 2, which means B is actually 2. Because remember, B is written as 1 over B. So we're going to talk real quick. B means it's being stretched by a factor of 2. Now, the negative on B is actually going to flip it. So we're going to actually change axes. And we'll go back and talk about where it's flipping in just a moment. So it's going to flip it over your y-axis. It's a horizontal flip. So remember, it's kind of looking opposite. Our H value means it's translated right horizontally 2 units, and it's being translated vertically up 1 unit. Okay? So again, the first thing we're going to do is put in those new asymptotes. So here at positive 2, remember, that's H, it's got to cross the x-axis. That's K, it's got to cross the y-axis. And we create almost like a new coordinate plane. It's almost like we moved our origin over. Now, we need to look at those points that we looked at before, 1, 1, negative 1, negative 1. Those are our reference points. We've talked about this before in previous units. I am going to, this is B, so I am going to actually multiply by 2, and it has to be a negative 2. And then I'm going to add, let's see if I can write that better. I'm going to add 2 to it. And then for the other value, the y, I'm simply going to add 1. So this one becomes negative 2 plus 2, which becomes 0. 1 plus 1 is 2. Here, if I multiply by negative 2 and add 2, negative 2 times negative 1 is 2. Add 2, we get 4. And then we're adding 1 here, so negative 1 plus 1 is 0. And I actually ended up with some intersect. So we have this point 0, 2 right here. And remember, our graph is going to cross up that way. And then we have the point 4, 0, because this one, and it's flipping over, is going to go this way. Now, we have one last little thing, and that's making things look in the correct format. So when you're given an equation, g of x equals 3x minus 4 over x minus 1, that doesn't help us because it doesn't look right. So we need to make it look right by dividing, and we've practiced division before. 3 goes into 3x 3 times, distribute it, change your signs and add. So our remainder is negative 1 over x minus 1, and we rewrite our function. G of x equals negative 1 over x minus 1 plus 3. Now it looks in the format for graphing. We'll practice doing those tomorrow as well.